What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Rook's Gaming Corner, a gamer's best friend. There's been an abundance of games coming out recently that I can only describe as interactive stories. You've got Telltale releasing games like the Game of Thrones series, their Tales from the Borderlands, and their ever-popular Walking Dead. But for the most part, they've been the only game company that's been taking advantage of this unique medium. That is until Square Enix threw their hat into the ring with Life is Strange, an episodic adventure following the life of a young college student who is gifted with mysterious powers. Is it any good? Well, yes and no.
The story follows Max, a talented photography student attending the prestigious Blackwall Academy. The game's first chapter has her dealing with the struggles of day-to-day school life as she tries to make friends, get good grades, and deal with all the pressures of being the shy new girl in school. Everything changes, however, when she accidentally stumbles upon the murder of a fellow classmate and discovers she has the unique ability to rewind time. And it's up to her and her alone to do something. Aside from the shocking introduction, the game's first chapter is surprisingly laid back, with the player spending their time controlling Max around and exploring her new school, and experimenting with her new time powers. I'd be upset with the lack of direction in the first chapter, but it's clear the writers are taking their time in creating an interesting world for the player to mess around in, as well as laying down pieces for setting up a much larger story. There's constant talk about the disappearance of one of the school's students, and as you explore the school, you'll come across characters that can only be described as key suspects, and I appreciate the game not shoving it into my face that they might be responsible for the girl's disappearance, and instead rely on the player's intuition to piece the clues together. You've got the creepy janitor, the school psychopath and his fraternity of muscle-headed douchebags, the money-grubbing school principal, and the list goes on. I ended up appreciating the game's slow build-up as there's a lot of characters to keep track of. The school itself is exquisitely designed and full to the brim with students to converse with, hidden picture opportunities you can find for trophies or achievements, and tons of stuff to click on. And every time you do, you get a little description from Max giving you insight to her character's likes, dislikes, and how she feels about the students that make up her school. Honestly, most of my time was just spent looking at every nook and cranny and messing around with my time control powers. The game's time travel mechanic is an interesting one, as it allows Max to manipulate her environment, allowing her to have prior knowledge of the obstacles she needs to overcome. The coolest feature, though, is her ability to go back in time and change conversations she has with students or teachers. Often completely redoing a conversation will open up additional dialogue options that Max can use in order to gain favor with the person she's conversing with. It's a fun little mechanic, however it's marred by the substandard voice acting the game has. Anna Tell, who voices Max, does a good job of portraying Max as the shy, outgoing, camera-loving girl that she is, but the supporting cast leaves a lot to be desired. And speaking of which, it's here that we get to the game's major downfall: its dialogue. Constant, outdated idioms are spouted by super cliché characters that reek of adult writers having no idea how young people actually talk, and instead got their ideas by watching Juno on repeat.
I hope you checked the perimeter, as my step-ass would say. Now, let's talk business.
Now you're totally stuck in the retro zone. Sad face.
Oh, sick. You're not a poser.
And let's be real here, these are things no sane person would say.
That is a tasty plasma. Maybe I could sneak in and watch Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I don't care what anybody says, that's one of the best sci-fi films ever made.
And it's a real shame too, because when the game's dialogue lets go of its pseudo-hipster bullshit and instead dives into Max and her friend Chloe's reaction to the more serious situations, it gets considerably better. This game addresses some heavy issues, and brings up hard-to-tackle subjects such as dealing with an abusive household, to the death of parents, to bullying and the ongoing pressures of youth and their need to fit in. The game treats its audience and characters with respect when these heavy topics are brought to light, and as a player, I found it hard watching our two main leads deal with them. What can you say to a friend who you just witnessed being abused by your stepdad? Sometimes there are no right answers, and as a player it's upsetting to watch, but in a good way. When a game's writing can make me feel empathy towards its main characters, that is a good sign, so my advice would be more of that, and less of the Juno talk. The game's time travel mechanic also allows for you to go back in time and change small decisions Max makes, but only to a certain extent. Sometimes an action made previously will come back to bite her later on, and it'll be too late to go back and rewind to change it. I'm glad that they added in these larger decisions, as it gives the player the feeling that they're not totally in control, even with all of their powers. That's until you realize during a second playthrough, however, that the choices you make don't ultimately matter outside of a few changed lines of dialogue. It suffers from the same weakness as Telltale, wherein these types of games trick the player into thinking the storyline has branching options based off of their input, but when in reality is as straightforward as they come. And while the ability to redo conversations and player choices can be interesting, it really falls apart during the game's, and I'm using air quotes here, action sequences. There is no tension in these sequences. No matter what kind of danger Max and Chloe get in, I don't feel like their lives are in danger at all, because ultimately they're not. Giving the player the ability to rewind time removes any and all suspense or worry for the player, especially when the game rewinds itself if Max gets hurt in any way, so these action sequences quickly become a chore.
I wanted to like Life is Strange more than I did. It does this great job of creating this gigantic school and filling it with all sorts of stuff to interact with, but I don't want to because the people that I am talking with have terrible, terrible writing. The dynamic between Max and Chloe is a good one though, and if you're a fan of games that takes its audience seriously in terms of handling complex issues, then you may be able to overlook some of the game's major shortcomings. I absolutely plan on buying the game's future chapters and updating you guys as the story goes along, but from an objective viewpoint, I can't dismiss the game's major flaws. So in conclusion, Life is Strange Chapter 1 Chrysalis gets a 6 out of 10. It is only slightly above the average interactive story, and if you are a fan of these kinds of stories like the Telltale games, I would recommend just buying the first chapter and seeing if it's something that you're into. But for everybody else, I would say give it a pass. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to start working on my own time-traveling powers, so I can go back in time and stop myself from eating this entire bag of sweet tart hearts. I'm gonna have a stroke.
Hey guys, thanks again for watching my review. Like I said, I'm going to be purchasing the other chapters of Life is Strange, so if you want to stay updated on if the story gets better or worse, consider clicking the subscribe button. It would really, really mean just wow, just the world to me. If you want to check out any of the other stuff I do, I've got one more serious review of Shadow of Mordor that came out in October, as well as the more goofy, funny top 10 Final Fantasy summons on the right. And as always, if you want to keep up to date on what's going on with me, you can always follow me on my social media. Click anywhere in the video. There's so many links, you'd be hard pressed not to find one. And then you can watch my videos, and it will feed my sugar addiction. And then I'll die of a heart attack, but I won't blame you, don't worry. Bye.